Hey guys, welcome to today's video. We're going to be discussing the Las Vegas Raiders offense and what to expect from them in 2020. Before we get started, please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow. And on a quick side note, I've been writing some articles for the updog.com, which is basically a sports article website for anybody under the age of 22 that wants to talk and write about any sports topic that they wanted to talk about. If you guys are interested in reading some of my articles as well as some of the other articles on the website, I will leave a link to that in the description down below. And if any of you are under the age of 22 and interested in doing some sports writing, you guys can sign up on the updog.com and start writing immediately. By the way, it's free, and the only requirements are that you have to be under 22 and you have to love sports. Anyway, let's get to the video, and I hope you enjoy. So before we get started on talking about the Raiders offense in 2020, let's talk about what they did in 2019. For starters, they were 11th in total yards, 9th in passing yards, 13th in rushing yards, 24th in points, and they were tied for 7th in turnovers, and they ranked 8th in sacks allowed with only 29 sacks given up. They are also one of the heavier run offenses in the NFL. In 2019, they threw the football 56% of the time, and they ran it 44% of the time. And although that seems like they did throw the football a lot more than they ran the football, the NFL is moving toward throwing the football a lot more, and 56% throwing the football is still below league average. So what does Jon Gruden want to do on the football field? So Gruden wants a more versatile offense that means that he can do more things on the field and just get more accomplished and be more aggressive at times. And now with the personnel they have, they feel like they can do just that. So obviously they went in and got Henry Ruggs. A big thing in the offseason was wanting to add a lot of speed to this offense and allowing for this offense to go 4 or 5 wide with skillful receivers that can stretch the field, and bringing in guys like Ruggs or Bryan Edwards allows them to do that. Also, they want to run old school football with heavy sets that incorporate their tight ends in Darren Waller, Foster Moreau, and Jason Witten. This offensive versatility will allow Gruden to attack each week and each game with as many options as possible to attack opposing defenses and continue to be aggressive. Gruden really trusts Josh Jacobs to be a real impact player, and he's not scared to play with 3 tight end sets, run the football, utilize the play action, and use Alec Ingold as the fullback to help Jacobs run the football. Also, they picked up a lot of talent in the draft, and I think this offense could be really good. Now let's go in and talk about the players on this roster that are going to make an impact for the Raiders in 2020. There is no better place to start than with Derek Carr. Carr is the franchise quarterback there. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, and he's been with the Raiders ever since 2014. However, this year he has some competition, but let's just talk about him for a second. Last year, he surprisingly actually had a really solid year. Carr is super underrated, and he doesn't get enough love from the NFL. So last year, he had a 70.4 completion percentage, which is an elite completion percentage. He threw for over 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Those were really good stats, and even the year before where he had 4,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, that's still a solid year. Carr is not going to throw for 30 touchdowns in an NFL season. He's only done that once in his career. But nonetheless, last year he actually threw for the highest completion percentage of his career, and he threw for the most yards of his career. So all in all, I think Carr is moving towards the right steps. Yet, for me, Carr is underrated, and I've said that earlier. But at the same time, he's nothing really more than an elite game manager. I mean, he's accurate. He's going to throw for probably 4,000 yards next year. He will probably end up putting up 20 touchdown passes and probably having 10 interceptions, which it's not going to jump off the depth chart. So this offseason, they ended up bringing in Marcus Mariota for 2 reasons. 1, to back up Derek Carr, and 2, to push Derek Carr for that starting job. A little bit with what happened in Tennessee last year with Marcus Mariota and Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill was on the bench, and Mariota wasn't playing well. And then as soon as Tannehill stepped up, he stepped up, took over the starting job. And although I don't think that's going to happen in Oakland this year, I think Mariota is there to add competition to Derek Carr and to make Derek Carr a better player. Yet, Mariota is a very capable backup. Last season, obviously in 2019, he only played in 7 games because of Tannehill coming in mid-season, but he threw for 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, but that's not really what Mariota can do in a full season. In a full season, which was 2018, he played in 14 games. Yes, he missed a few games, but he put up 2,500 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions on a 68.9 completion percentage. Mariota, I don't think is going to be able to win the starting job, but if Derek Carr falters a few games, Mariota is a capable backup to take that starting role and to help that offense play well. Now let's move to the running game. As I said, the running game is going to be a focal point for this Raiders offense. They're one of the more run-heavy teams in the NFL, and it's good that they have finally a feature back to rely on in Josh Jacobs. Jacobs last season, which was his rookie year, was awesome. He played in 13 games, rushed for 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns on 242 rushing attempts, and he did a little bit of damage out of the backfield as a passing back. He had 20 catches for 166 receiving yards and no receiving touchdowns. I think if he can be a bigger contributor in the passing game, then Jacobs could end up being a top 10 running back in the NFL. As of now, I see him as a fringe top 10 running back in the NFL, but nonetheless, Jacobs was really skilled last year. He really showed that he could be a feature back. He could have 240 carries, and he had a 4.8 average yards per carry, which is a really healthy number. So look for Jacobs to continue to be that workload feature back in that Raiders run game, and look for the Raiders to really rely on him to move the chains and to pick up yards. Now let's move to the backup running back, Jalen Richard. I don't want to spend too much time on Jalen Richard, but I think we should just talk about this running back room anyway. Richard last year in 16 games had 145 rushing yards, no rushing touchdowns. But if Josh Jacobs ended up going down with injury, Richard has flashed at times in his time with the Raiders. In his rookie season in 2016, he had 83 rushing attempts for 491 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown, so you know what he's capable of. He's never had more than 1 rushing touchdown in a season in his NFL career, but nonetheless, as a backup running back, there's no problems with Jalen Richard. Also, they picked up Lynn Bowden Jr. in the draft out of Kentucky. But the thing is with Lynn Bowden Jr. is not really a running back. He is a running back that can also catch the football, and he can also throw the football too. He's an all-around weapon. But at Kentucky last year, he had 185 rushing attempts for 1,400 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. But he also had 30 receptions for 348 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. His best receiving season was in 2018, where he had 67 catches for 745 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. He can be a wide receiver. He can be a running back. He can play all over the field. So look for Lynn Bowden Jr. to really add another dimension, another flair to this offense. Now let's move on to the wide receivers, which was a big focal point this offseason. They brought in a lot of wide receivers either through the draft or in free agency. So we're going to really cover this wide receiver room. As I said, Jon Gruden is okay with running 5 receiver sets, and he said that he's okay with running spread formations. If he wants to run spread formations, they've got the personnel to do it, and it all starts with Henry Ruggs. Ruggs at Alabama last year played in 12 games, had 40 catches for 746 receiving yards and 7 receiving touchdowns. Those stats don't sound great, but what Henry Ruggs is a speed demon. He's lightning fast. They picked him in the first round, and they picked him over guys like Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. I personally thought CeeDee Lamb should have been the number 1 receiver gone. He ended up falling to Dallas, and he was the 3rd receiver taken in the draft. Yet, I think Ruggs is a great fit with the Raiders, and here's why. The Raiders have to play the Chiefs twice a year. And what do the Chiefs love to do? They love to have speed on their offense. If you look at Tyreek Hill, Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman, all those guys are speed demons, and Oakland has to keep up with them offensively. And bringing a guy like Ruggs into the mix, who 1, can stretch the field, 2, can be super versatile, and 3, has a great work ethic, is a match made in heaven. So look for Henry Ruggs to be the feature number 1 wide receiver there and be an absolute great weapon for Jon Gruden and Derek Carr to utilize as a person who can spread the field, run the slant, pick up yards after catch, and be an all-around weapon. They also have got Tyrell Williams, who is a very underrated player. He struggled with injury a little bit last year, but if he'd stayed healthy, he would have had a really nice campaign. In 2019, in 14 games, he had 42 catches for 651 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. Williams is not going to put up 1,000 receiving yards, probably. That's not really his game. In a full season as a number 2 wide receiver, I see him possibly putting up 750 yards, 5 or 6 touchdowns, and maybe 50 or 60 catches. So look for Williams to be a dependable guy for Derek Carr. And with Henry Ruggs and then Tyrell Williams, they've got 2 reliable guys who can play on the outside, who can go and make plays with the football, and who can be really dependable in the passing game. They've also have got Hunter Renfrow, the former Clemson product, who had a great year last year for the Raiders. He was picked up in the 5th round, 149th overall in 2019, and for a 5th rounder, he played really well. He had 49 catches for 605 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns in 13 games. So if he played 16 games, he could have had over 700 receiving yards, probably had 5 touchdowns, and he probably would have had like 60 receptions. So look for Renfrow to have another great season in 2020 as he's able to stay healthy, hopefully, and hopefully he just becomes a better wide receiver in his second year in the NFL. They also brought in Bryan Edwards out of South Carolina. I loved this pick in the third round. I didn't think he'd fall in the third round, but he did. And Edwards was a beast last year at South Carolina. He had 71 catches for 816 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. Edwards is tall. He's 6'3", 212, and he kind of reminds me of Kenny Golladay. I know it's a little bit of a stretch there, but Golladay is a player who can go up and be an impact player in the red zone, who can go up and catch the football, and who has surprising speed. That's basically Bryan Edwards' game. He can go up and catch the football. He has surprising speed. He's actually a semi-deep threat, which is surprising. If you look at his tape, he does blow by corners with his speed. He doesn't look fast, but he is. And he's also just a reliable target. I mean, he was one of the best wide receivers in South Carolina history. I believe he has the South Carolina Gamecock record for most receiving yards in a career there. So look for Bryan Edwards to be a great pickup in this Raiders offense, and I think he can do a lot of damage. They also have Nelson Agholor, who I know Eagles fans absolutely despise, but he is a Super Bowl champion. He's got a lot of experience, and as a fifth receiver who has some experience in the NFL playing with the Eagles, I think he's a really good option. I mean, last year he had 39 catches for 363 yards in 11 games, but the year before he had 64 catches for 736 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. There's nothing really wrong with Agholor. Yes, some people say he can't catch a football, but at the end of the day, as a fifth or fourth receiver, I think Agholor is a great option to have on this Raiders team. Now that Jon Gruden has 3, 4, 5 really suitable wide receivers who can play, he can go 4 or 5 wide, and he can trust that those personnel groupings and those formations are going to be successful. Now let's talk about the tight end room there in Las Vegas. I almost said Oakland. Let's start with Darren Waller. Waller had a breakout season last year. In his second season with Oakland, he had 90 catches for 1,100 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. Now, the thing with Darren Waller is, yes, he was amazing last year. He was one of the best tight ends in the NFL last year. He played in 16 games. He had 117 targets. He was electric. But the thing with Darren Waller is, before that, he had almost done nothing. I mean, in 2018 with the Raiders, in 4 games played, he had 75 receiving yards on 6 catches. And then in 2016 with Baltimore, in 12 games, he had 10 receptions for 85 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. So other than 2019, Waller's basically done nothing in his NFL career. So I don't think Waller's going to end up putting up 100 receptions next year for 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's not going to get better than he was last year, in my mind. I think Waller putting up 75 catches for 900 yards and maybe 5 touchdowns is about where he's going to be. But the Raiders also have some other tight ends on the roster that could end up stealing some of his target share. They did pick up Jason Witten this offseason, the 38-year-old, 11-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro member, and 2012's Walter Payton Man of the Year. Obviously, Witten has got a ton of experience. He's been with Dallas his entire career. And in 2019, he actually showed that he still has it. I mean, he played in all 16 games. He had 63 catches for 529 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. And although I'm going to predict that he's going to see a dip in production from what he did last year, I think he'll probably have 40 catches for maybe 400 yards and maybe 3 receiving touchdowns. As a number 2 tight end, or maybe even number 3 tight end with Foster Moreau on the roster, I think Witten is great. Also, talking about Foster Moreau, they do have him. He is probably going to be the 3rd tight end on the roster. He could be number 2. But in 2019, that was his first season in the NFL after being taken in the 4th round, 137th overall out of LSU. Moreau had an okay season. I mean, he had 21 catches for 174 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns, which aren't great stats. But as a 3rd or even 2nd tight end, he's a good option. And especially, as I said, Jon Gruden doesn't want to shy away from using heavy sets, using 3 tight ends on the field, running the football, using play action. And if he's got 3 big targets that can go up and catch the football, who can help Derek Carr in the passing game, he's got those guys with Darren Waller, Jason Witten, and Foster Moreau. So look out for them to be on the field a lot next season, as the Raiders have said that they want to use 3 tight end sets, and they've got 3 good tight ends to do it. Now let's move to the offensive line, which is among the league's best. Let's start with Kolton Miller. Miller in 16 games last year played over 1,000 snaps, had 4 penalties and 7 sacks allowed. Former UCLA product, was picked in the 1st round back in 2018, and in 2019 he had a 64.9 PFF player grade, which is pretty solid at the left tackle position. It does get better from Kolton Miller on this Raiders O-line, but Miller as a left tackle is a solid guy to have. At the left guard position is probably going to be Richie Incognito. Incognito revitalized his career last year. He missed a little bit of time last year. He only ended up playing in 12 games, but nonetheless, Incognito, who's now 37, had a really good year last year. He played over 750 snaps, had 8 penalties, and only gave up 1 sack, which was pretty solid, and had a 74.0 PFF player grade. If Incognito is able to play like he did last year, then this Raiders offensive line is going to be good. This Raiders run game is going to be good. And look out for Incognito to still be one of those better left guards in the NFL. At the center position is one of the best centers in the NFL in Rodney Hudson. Hudson played in 15 games last year, had 904 snaps, played 3 penalties allowed, and didn't give up a sack, which is obviously awesome. He had a 71.0 PFF player grade, and Hudson is a veteran guy. He's been in the NFL for a while, and I think he's a 3-time Pro Bowler. He's now 31. He's still a solid athletic player. And in the center of that Raiders offensive line, Hudson is as good as you can get in the NFL. And look for the pairing of Hudson and Incognito to be really solid in 2020. Now let's move to the right guard in Gabe Jackson. Gabe Jackson played 707 snaps last year, gave up 4 penalties, 5 sacks allowed, and he had a 61.8 PFF player grade. Now, there have been some rumors about Gabe Jackson maybe being traded from the Raiders. He's got a big contract. He hasn't really been playing up to that contract of late, but nonetheless, I mean, if Gabe Jackson's able to get back to how he was playing before he signed that contract, then I think that right guard position will be good. However, if they end up deciding to move on from Gabe Jackson, then they did bring in another guard in the NFL draft in the 4th round in John Simpson out of Clemson. Simpson's strong, but he's not powerful. He is a little bit raw, but with a little bit of coaching up, I think Simpson could be a solid right guard or even left guard for this Raiders offensive line. He adds a little bit of depth, and if they end up deciding to trade Gabe Jackson, then I think John Simpson could be a good player to put there. At the right tackle position, there's going to be no questions about it. It's going to be Trent Brown. He played 582 snaps last year, 5 penalties allowed, 1 sack allowed, and he had a 69.1 PFF player grade, which in part because he wasn't healthy all of last year. He did miss a few games. But if Trent Brown is able to get back to his healthy ways and is able to be a great right tackle, I mean, this guy's a Pro Bowler. He's a Super Bowl champ. I mean, he won the Super Bowl with the Patriots. He's got a lot of pedigree. He was a Pro Bowler last year, played in 11 games. He's going to be one of the better players on this offensive line. And, I mean, they've got a lot of talent on this offensive line. Richie Incognito is a Pro Bowl-type player. Rodney Hudson's a Pro Bowl-type player. Trent Brown's a Pro Bowl-type player. And at left guard, center, and right tackle, they're absolute locks. Yes, Gabe Jackson does pose a little bit of questions, but he's still an above-average right guard. And although Gabe Jackson's on a big contract and he hasn't been playing well of late, maybe he can get back to how he was playing before that big contract. Also at left tackle, I mean, Kolton Miller, solid left tackle. And I think overall, this Raiders offensive line is definitely a top 5 offensive line unit in 2020. They gave up the 8th least sacks last year. That's a really good number. They were one of the best run-blocking units in the NFL, and I think they're going to open up holes for Josh Jacobs. They're going to keep Derek Carr upright, and if this offensive line is able to stay healthy, there were some injury concerns with them last year. This Raiders offense in general is going to be great. As I said before, Jon Gruden wants to run the football. He wants to play old-school football. He wants to use play action. He wants to go 4 or 5 wide at times, and he's got all those players. He's got all that personnel to be able to do that and be able to do that successfully. So in 2020, look for this Raiders offense to maybe light the league on storm. I don't know if they're going to be a top 5 offense. There has been a little bit of talk about that. Darren Waller came out saying that he thinks they have potential to be a top 5 offense, but I think they could be the 8th, 9th, 10th best offense in football. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They have a solid quarterback in Derek Carr. There's nothing wrong with him. He's super underrated. They have a good running game with Josh Jacobs. They have underrated and very talented wide receivers in Henry Ruggs, Tyrell Williams, Hunter Renfrow, as well as Bryan Edwards and Nelson Agholor. And I think overall, the tight end room is going to be great too. I mean, Darren Waller, if he is able to even come close to what he did last year, and this Raiders offense in general is going to be very exciting to watch. In their first season in Las Vegas, look for this Raiders offense to get back to their old ways of being a great offense in the NFL. And I think overall, they have the potential to be a top 10 offense in the NFL. So watch out for that, Raider Nation. Now that you've reached the end of my video, I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe as it helps my channel out. And check out my other videos on my channel. Also, you can follow my Instagram. The link is in the description down below. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, see ya.